Good evening and welcome to Virtual LibraryFest 2020. I'm Carol Weinstra. I serve on the board of the Walnut Creek Library Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to Shining a Light on Untold Stories. LibraryFest 2020 is produced by the Walnut Creek Library Foundation in partnership with the City of Walnut Creek and the Contra Costa County Library. Thank you to our event sponsors, John Muir Health, the Dean and Margaret Lesher Foundation, the Simpson family, Friends of the Walnut Creek Library, and Friends of the Ignacio Valley Library. Vanessa Hua, the author of Deceit and Other Possibilities, is a best-selling author and columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. For 2 decades, Vanessa has been writing about Asia and the diaspora, filing stories from China, Burma, Panama, South Korea, and Ecuador. Her collection of short stories, first published in 2016, was recently released as a new edition, featuring additional stories about immigrant families navigating a new America. Her book was awarded the Asian Pacific Award for Literature and was a finalist for the California Book Award and the New American Voices Award. Bridget Quinn is the author of She Votes: How U.S. Women Won Suffrage and What Happened Next. Bridget is an award-winning author and a regular contributor to online arts magazine Hyperallergic. She's a nationally sought-after speaker on women and art. Her book contains intersectional stories of the women who won suffrage and who continue to raise their voices for equality. In honor of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, 100 women artists contributed illustrations to her book. Both Vanessa and Bridget are longtime members of the Bay Area collective, The Writer's Grotto. We are so delighted to spend the next hour with them as they discuss their new books. Enjoy the program.
Thank you for that introduction, Carol, and for the Library Foundation having us, and for Flashlight for selling the books, and to all of you for joining us tonight. I'm so excited to be chatting with Bridget. I think both of us saw each other's books in manuscript form.
Definitely. I mean, it just makes me so happy to see you. Hi. And thank you so much to the Library Foundation and to Flashlight Books. It's the best thing in the world to feel support for books right now. It's everything.
Yes, and I think Bridget and I were both delighted because we both made a stop at Flashlight and signed books, which is something, I don't know if it was the case for you, Bridget, but it was the first time I got to sign books.
Same. I mean, I've signed a lot of book plates. Yeah. This was the first time I got to sit down and touch each book, sign my name, and that's such a rite of passage for authors and something that I always really enjoy doing. And so, yeah, it felt really good.
It was very special. But We'll get to that, about what it's like to launch in a pandemic. So.
An awesome tale.
Yes. But yeah, maybe Bridget, maybe the both of us could start off like talking about, just if someone asks you like, oh, what's your book about? Well,
I want to go first because you have a better thing to say than I do. So what is my book about? My book is about the history of women's rights in the United States. And it's an intersectional story, meaning finally, or, you know, at long last, we're looking at more stories than just the one that came down to us from 2 very specific women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. And it's meant to be celebratory as well as clear-eyed about how women's rights have progressed over the last maybe 250 years. And it's illustrated by 100 women artists, sort of as a hat tip to the 100-year anniversary of the 19th Amendment.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a joyous celebration.
We need a little joy.
Yes.
We need a little joy.
Exactly.
All right, now I want yours. I'm going to sit back and enjoy it.
Okay. So my book, Deceit and Other Possibilities, is, well, when people ask, I say it's
I'll hold it
about
up.
model minorities behaving badly. So that, yes. So
Perfection.
yeah, that is to say, you know, and the stories cover a span of experiences, anything from a Stanford imposter to a Korean American missionary to an undocumented boy from Mexico. And these are all stories that I was, you know, inspired in part by my own experiences growing up as the daughter of Chinese immigrants here in the East Bay, but also as a journalist for the San Francisco Chronicle, where for many years I've been able to cover immigrant emerging communities.
I mean, that's something that really comes through in those stories, I think. I think for some people, short stories can be a little scary. They seem so literary and they seem sometimes difficult. And these stories aren't that at all. They're these rollicking rides through really closely observed communities. And I can't help but feel like your work as a journalist has served your work as a fiction writer. And I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about that.
That's a great question. I mean, I think for me, I love being able to do both. And, you know, like, I think just writing a column, you know, I'm excited for the one that's running this Friday. And
can you give us a little hint?
It involves both harvesting and foraging of nuts and the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I made it work.
Wow.
At least my reader, my husband, and my editor made it work. Anyway.
Perfect.
So I love being able to sort of capture the zeitgeist, say, with a column or with a news story or feature that may run within days or months. But whereas, you know, a short story is written over a longer period of time. And I think my training as a journalist taught me just, you know, I'm overall just a very curious person, and I just want to explore their lives and, you know, have been trained to sort of step out of the way, like, and right. To let the character, whether they're real or, you know, in the case of fiction, invented, let them tell their own story without me sort of, you know, putting on a mask, so to speak, of the character. And, you know, I think it's, and, you know, being a journalist also trains me to write daily and on deadline, even though the first draft is not the last draft, and, you know, to keep pushing forward. So
can I just say that when I am in a place of despair with my writing, one of the things I say to myself is, what would Vanessa do? She would just get it done. And I am so in awe that you write a weekly column. It blows my mind. Like, every time I have a deadline, which is kind of often, I freak out and I think, how does Vanessa do it every week?
Yes. Oh, I also want to add that Bridget and I are each other's work wives, water cooler buddies, virtual water cooler buddies. So I think
cheerleaders.
We both read each other's work, and also kind of, you know, I think sometimes as women, we're like, should I do this or should I ask for this? And we're always right there saying, go for it. So
totally. And you need that. You so need that, I think. Yeah. Someone to say, just do it.
Yes. Yes. So, and if you do not have a Bridget in your life, you can have a Bridget in your life through She Votes, which is told in the sort of the same winning conversational, you know, hopeful, yet honest tone that you bring to all our conversations. And I was, you know, hoping you could talk about that, just how, you know, there's been lots of books coming out this year about the centennial, but what is it about your book that I think that is, you know, actually so true of your first book and will be of your next book, but just how you are able to bring that sense of fun and excitement and curiosity to history.
Wow. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to, first of all, what you were saying as a journalist, that you are interested in people. I'm interested in the stories of history, and I think they really matter. I think that, I mean, I passionately believe that if we don't know where we've come from, we can't understand the world we live in, and we can't make the correct choices in our time for the future. But I think a lot of the sort of the attitude in my books, which I say that because More than one critic has used this word I have never heard except in criticism of my work, which is attitudinal. That attitudinalness comes from being a high school teacher and a college professor and talking to young people and competing with some of the really fun things in the world, like their friends and Netflix and video games or whatever it is. Like, I really need to spin a good yarn to grab them and say, you know, this isn't going to be boring. It's not going to hurt. It's going to be cool. Let's just take a look. And I kind of feel the same way about looking at some of the hard things in the past too, some of the painful parts of American history and of feminist history that is racist, that is, you know, extremely painful to look at, that we don't need to be afraid of it. We need to look at it and learn from it and move forward.
Yeah, two things I'm thinking. So the book opens with you attending the Women's March in 2017 and ends with this, book ended with this beautiful letter to your daughter. And so it really does infuse a sense of like how history touches the present and the future. Mm. And also just, again, like, you know, when I want to talk more about this with you, but just like how every step of the way in the book, you kind of not only tell sort of the main narrative that many of us know or half remember, but also identifying other women who we think we've heard of, know their story, but it turns out to be something vastly more interesting. And I really admire the way you're able to put it together. And so I guess I was wondering, like, was there, I don't necessarily want to call them hidden stories because they were not who was hiding, but they may be unacknowledged by the mainstream. Like, what was your kind of favorite thing to be able to shine a light on?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, I think the thing I most wanted to shine a light on was something I learned in, I think, 1993. I mean, I've known for decades, which is that Sojourner Truth did not say, "Ain't I a woman?" That was something fabricated by white suffragists, and that Sojourner Truth had her own very important message that she wanted to bring in a different way. And that was brought originally by Nell Irvin Painter, who wrote the foreword to my book and who is an artist who I admire so much. So I really wanted to bring that story forward because even decades later, it's not acknowledged. The New Yorker recently and the New York Times both used the "Ain't I a Woman" quote. But the story that most surprised me was discovering that Sacagawea was unknown to American history until the 20th century. I had no idea, and I grew up in a place where Sacagawea is someone really revered as a historical figure for Montana, which is where I grew up. Yeah.
But that's sort of hopeful then, in a way, that it's tragic she was kind of forgotten for so long, but the fact that now she, you know, that she emerged. The other thing about Sojourner is, like, I remember reading, I think she had a Dutch accent or something.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, she spoke Dutch until she was 8 or 9 years old, and then always spoke with a Dutch inflected accent. I mean, Ulster County, New York was Dutch speaking well into the 19th century and had slaves. I mean, slavery existed as a ubiquitous American institution. It wasn't just Southern until well into the 19th century. And that's something that's also not really acknowledged, I think, in mainstream history, which tries to really create this sort of Southern problem, and it was an American problem.
Right. And the other thing that was shocked by was, you know, Black suffragists being asked to march in the back of the protests.
Yeah, in 1913. That's not that long ago, right?
Yeah.
And that was so some people wouldn't be offended. I mean, it's not that hard to imagine right now when we're seeing the kinds of things we're seeing in mainstream society caught on video every day.
Right.
Even in ostensibly progressive places like San Francisco, which is someplace that appears in your writing and in many of these stories, the Bay Area, a place you know well. I think you grew up here, right? I mean, you're
I'm
native Northern Californian.
Yes, I use the word, I say hella. I'm hella Northern Californian. That's how it goes.
Is it hella NorCal, maybe?
Or hella or hecka, but it's definitely a tell. That
totally.
From here, so.
Totally. That and it's it, but we'll talk about that later.
Right. And the 101, putting a the.
Oh, right. Is everyone following us? Anyway, but you are from the Bay Area, but your characters are completely not you, right? They're men, they're women, they're college students, they are young men from the Mission District. I mean, what gives you courage sounds maybe too strong, but just the ability to jump in?
Well, and I think this is a question, depending on who's tuning in, if you're in the writing community or not, or you may have heard, there has been a lot of conversation in recent years about this notion of cultural appropriation. Can you write across your gender, your generation, across your sexuality, all of these things? And I think for me, of course it's possible, but it's a matter of approaching the project or the story or the character from a place of humbleness, and not arrogance, and not turning someone's race into sort of a device in the story. And that, if the character is a particular ethnicity or some other marker of identity, it's for a very specific reason that's central to the character and the way it sort of plays out in the stories. And it's, one thing that I've had the pleasure of is I think I'll write about communities that I have an ongoing relationship with as well. I think that's a part of how you're able to pull it off, so to speak, whether it's from covering the community or having friends or colleagues from the community. It's not only just having this understanding that I'm not going there to mine for a story and then leave, right. But this is an ongoing relationship. If I ask a friend from the community, like, oh, would you be willing to read this story? Does it sit right? Is there, could you tell me what doesn't seem, what might be potentially offensive, let's say? I think the writer Alex Chi had a really interesting point. The first step to knowing another community shouldn't be to write a story about them. Check your bookcase, see if you've been reading work by writers from that community. Check your friend circle, see if you're a part of those communities in different ways. And I think, that's something that I thought of when I was writing the stories. And, now as I continue to write more fiction, again, with people who really bear not much resemblance to me on the exterior, those are important considerations.
When do you think, if people are writers, when do you think is the time and the proximity of relationship where you can say to someone, will you read this for me? Will you, I don't really love the idea of a sensitivity reader, but of asking a friend to do that, but saying am I getting this? Is this okay for me to do? Do you think that's okay to ask another writer who's a friend?
Well, I remember someone we didn't go to the same grad school, but someone's looking for someone Chinese to read their book.
Yeah, that's what I don't like.
Hard pass. This person, whoever she was, didn't even know me. What if I was a terrible reader, but the only thing was that she somehow thought I'd put the stamp of a Chinese
approval, the Chinese approval stamp.
Yes. So, I think something to think about is can I ask someone this favor? It would be have I ever done them a favor?
Yeah.
Is it a relationship?
Right.
Or, there are professional services. Just make sure you're compensating whoever you're working with appropriately, or, that it's, again, it either has to be someone you have a long-standing relationship with, or it has to be someone with whom you set the terms of how you want, this service to go. So, yeah.
Right, where it's clear what the transaction is.
Exactly.
There is a time though where I think, okay, one of my favorite stories of yours is Acceptance, which I think is many people's, well, I wouldn't say many people's favorite story, but it's one that I hear people refer to, that I think it has so much resonance. And I'd like to say a lot of things about this story, but one of them is, it's not a story I think anyone but someone like you could write, right? Who has gone to an elite college, who knows what's at stake getting in. And maybe you can say a little bit about the story. Maybe not, maybe anyone can write that who has a great imagination, but the details are so good.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, and I'll answer the question, but I want to get back to talking about your book too.
Okay.
But so Accepted is about a Stanford imposter. And so back in 2007, there was a Korean American woman from Orange County who told everyone, I got into Stanford and I got a scholarship from the ROTC. She makes her way to campus. You know, she's like, finds some people and says, like, there's a problem with housing. Can I stay with you? And she goes to class. She takes tests. She, you know, is living this sham life on campus all the way through the middle of winter quarter before the RA realizes, like, wait, you don't go here. And then I began to hear other stories of Asian American imposters, like a South Asian man who said he was had gotten into UC Irvine for med school. Graduation came. He attempted to march in the procession, but someone called him out. And you know, another case where someone called in a bomb threat to UC Riverside to again avoid, you know, his parents finding out that he had not graduated. So I just was really struck by, you know, clearly not all Asian Americans imposters, you know, con their way through higher education.
No,
but
clearly not.
Yes, but I was very curious about what was it that brought this person, how did they end up in this circumstance? How would they, in a parallel world of my imagination, how would they try to get out of it, but, you know, but still fail? But, you know, that story, I've taught it, been invited to speak at high schools and colleges. And, you know, I think it's been a favorite of teachers to send their kids. And it was interesting, though, to actually teach it at Stanford. And
yes,
it's not just about, say, race or filial duty, but one of the students said the story's also entirely about class, which is something that is in some ways not talked about as openly. As hard as it is to talk about race in this country, it's, you know, equally or maybe even harder to talk about class or to admit to it in places that pride themselves on being egalitarian.
Like higher education, which I have to say was definitely my experience of class consciousness and some class rage. I mean, when I first read that story, I think I identified with the parents. I just felt so much tenderness for this young person going through this, you know, why does society do this to young people? Why does it seem like it's so important? But most recently when I read it, I was all about like revenge.
Burn it all down.
I was all about the protagonist. So, I mean, I think that's a sign of really, really good literature when it changes for you, when you reread it, when you're in a different place, when history's in a different place and you see it differently.
So, yeah, thank you so much. And so with She Votes, looking, you know, this letter I mentioned that you write to your daughter, how did sort of, you know, could you talk about what it was like to reflect on what you learned looking back on, and then maybe kind of looking at it through your daughter's eyes, or trying to imagine that, and what's it like to sort of take these, I don't know how you would put it, parallel, like double, triple, quadruple consciousnesses about history?
I mean, it does feel like that, right? Because I start in the 18th century with one of the wives of the founding fathers, and then move through to my daughter who's in high school in the Bay Area. And to see really though, how this one thread pulls all the way through, whether it's gun rights, because I finished the book right after the Parkland shootings in Florida, whether it's gun rights, whether it's race, whether it's, I mean, women's
immigration.
Control. Yeah, immigration completely, women's control of their bodies, all of these things, right? And that's one of the shocking things. When I was reading the audiobook, the producers in the studio kept saying, this is so timely. This is so timely. I mean, police violence at the 1913 Women's March to, you know, liberal white women who are abolitionists suddenly saying racist things. Like, these are things that just keep repeating and repeating. So there was a lot, I felt a real tenderness talking to my daughter, just hoping that there can be change. And I even what feels to me like quite a dark time. I mean, I have to say, one of the gifts of living in history, this is going to sound crazy, but is that there have been many terrible dark times. like when I hear people say like, this is unprecedented, it really isn't. Like, it's been terrible, and it's terrible right now, and it's been terrible. And I'm not saying it got better. It got better for a time, but we can make change. We can turn this ship around. And I believe that because I've seen so much change in history. So that's the hopeful side of it. It's pretty fascinating though to read that letter now, because I finished the book in 2018 and so much has happened in 2019 and 2020. But the things that I talked about in that chapter, some of them aren't so foregrounded in our consciousness, like the Parkland shootings, like gun rights. But some are, like there had just been a big wildfire that had killed over 80 people in Northern California. I talked about Black Lives Matter a little bit. The Standing Rock Sioux were in the middle of the fight for water rights and for defending water. You know, these are ongoing struggles, and she's 19 now and starting college and really in a tough place. But the reason I'm hopeful is just seeing how much political will young people have and how much political savvy they have. I hope they'll vote. I really hope they'll vote.
She's registered to vote.
She was registered to vote. But, you know, I have to say, one of the things that was very shocking to me with my older child, my son, was realizing that there was really not much civics in his education. I mean, there was conceptual looks at US history, but there wasn't like, here's what you do and here's how you do it. And there was no kind of voting push in the high school for when kids turned 18. And that's when I realized that it was when he turned 18 that I realized he didn't know, and he didn't know how to do it necessarily. And I think that level of education needs to come back, that kind of not patriotic education, whatever that thing is called that the president is talking about,
Right.
but actual civic engagement education. How do we act as citizens? What is it to be a citizen? Why do we vote? Why does your vote matter? God, it's so, so, so important.
Well, I think that's why your book is so perfect for this time. Like, give it to every high school student. Like, get them excited. Get them, you know, so they understand where we came from. Oh, I do want to share a story that you told me though. That what is your mom's bedtime routine with your audiobook?
Oh, you guys.
It's so sweet though.
I know. So my mom didn't know how to get Audible. She doesn't even have a smartphone, but my nephew was there. I just have to say my nephew is 42, so it sounds like he's super young, but he's just young enough to know how to use Audible. So, and he somehow loaded Audible for her, but she still doesn't know how to work it. So he was staying with her, and she said, can you put on Bridget's book? And he said, what chapter do you want it on? She goes, oh, it doesn't matter. I haven't read it. I just like hearing her voice when I go to sleep.
It's such a wonderful story.
That just kills me, you guys. Also, she told me she had a friend who hired someone to come in and read the book to her.
So it's like her own Audible.
I know. And she said, my mom said, you can get it on the machine.
So there you have it. The book is perfect for high school standards and for...
And 93-year-old women.
Exactly.
Guys, it's ideal.
Right.
As is Deceit and Other Possibilities. Completely agree. In fact, I gave it to a high school teacher who I know used it in his classes. I mean, that must feel really satisfying to know.
My favorite was, didn't you say you gave it to your chiropractor?
Yeah, I gave it to my chiropractor because he was, I can't remember what he was saying. And I was like, I have got the book for you. You're going to love it. And he did love it. And he was not much of a reader of like that kind of, you know, literary fiction. You know, I feel sad. I feel like I may be dissed short stories, but I know that there's this feeling out there that short stories are this intellectual exercise, and they're not. They're just, these are like stories, great stories, fun.
Thank you. Yeah, I think sometimes, you know, I've talked to people who are like, do you flip past the poems in the New Yorker? Do you flip past the short stories? Or I'll look at people's bookshelves and there will only be nonfiction. So
Yeah, that's
yeah. So,
That's
but
true.
I mean, I think people like what they like.
right. But
Yeah.
I just need to say, when you say that, so as an art historian, one of the things I always say to people, because they say, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. And I always say, you actually like what you know. So the more you read fiction, the more you live in the worlds of other consciousnesses and enter into the empathy of other experiences, the more you crave and enjoy those things.
No,
So
that's a wonderful point. And actually, there's been research on this that readers of literary fiction, that is to say, fiction that doesn't repeat stereotypes, fiction that sort of goes against
right.
the grain of like a formulaic, like what's cliche, what's been handed down. It does engender empathy, and so the question, that's something that I've, even my childhood heroes were, characters and by authors who we didn't live in the same era, didn't share the same race, but, Laura Ingalls, Anne of Green Gables,
Right.
All those books, that featured headstrong young girls who wanted to grow up to be writers, and then, being able to, you know, the fact that they wanted to be writers just made it more, it
Completely.
made it a thing that I could want myself. Yeah.
And that they became writers. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's why representation matters, right? And it doesn't even have to be a one-to-one correspondence, but the kind of person I am, to see that in literature, in art, it's essential. It's essential. I mean, I feel like that as a person who grew up in the 60s and 70s, when there really weren't women in movies that I wanted to be like, right? I couldn't identify with almost any woman in a movie. And I projected myself onto male characters, and I think that's very common. Um, there's a whole narrative philosophy around that, but I feel like we're part of a vanguard of people who are trying to create stories, and in my case, illuminate art that can be a reflecting mirror for people of any age, of any kind.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that is so hopeful is that, they say, write the book that you'd want to read. And then you write the book. If you do that, then the book you write helps others write the books that they want to read, that they want to write. Because there's just something in terms of being able to convene a conversation, in terms of making people feel visible. All of that is so special. I think right now, especially in a time when we are all so socially distanced or haven't seen friends or family in person for so long, just a really hard time. Um, so what's it been like to launch She Votes during a pandemic?
I mean, it wasn't what I expected at all. Of course, the book was crafted with the idea that it was going to come out as part of the celebration of the 100-year anniversary of ratification of the 19th Amendment, with all of the attendant brouhaha that was going to go around that, festivals, conferences, and none of them happened. I mean, some of them went online. It's really not the same.
Yeah.
It was really, it's been really daunting. And I mean, some things about it have been kind of cool. Like, I've gotten to speak, I spoke in Alabama a couple weeks ago at the Queen's Library in New York. Like, things like that are pretty cool. But I miss people, and I really miss that sense of engaging with other human beings and feeling that energy in the room. And I wish I could have had that. Your book came out right when it started.
Yes.
Like, it must have been the same week.
I was supposed to have my first events starting that week, and then just like someone was flying in from New York to do this joint event together, but then suddenly it was like, it was right before the official shutdown, but I was like trying to explain like, and then the Olympics were canceled, like all these things, like the Bay Area Book Festival, all these
Right.
that one actually hit me really hard. Just I don't know. That was when the world turned. And so, on the other hand, in terms of events going online, I've been able to read or be at events with other authors that I maybe I might have met at a festival, but like just a far greater number, or just, you know, I've talked to people, I've heard that people from other, you know, who don't live in big cities or
Right.
near big cities, they just usually would never get access to a live event. And now there's something about accessibility that I think we'll still have to keep thinking about, you know, in the future.
Completely agree. I mean, I keep thinking about when my kids were little and I really felt isolated from the literary world, how amazing it would have been to be able to connect, to be able to come to an event like this, to be able to hear authors talk, to maybe even go to Tin House or Bread Loaf. You know, that would have been amazing. So I do think there is an upside for sure. I miss art. I miss going to museums. I'm going to a museum for the first time tomorrow.
Which they're all reopening.
Yep. Tomorrow I'm going to the DeYoung and I'm going to see the Frida Kahlo show that I reviewed. It was up for 3 days, but I don't think it was open to the wider public yet. I think like maybe just members and the press, and then it closed. So it's been sitting, just hanging in the dark for 5.5 months. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. So yeah, just a PSA. I notice a lot of the museums have free community days if you're not already a member. So if something, go to the websites, and because I was looking at them myself.
The DeYoung and Legion of Honor are free on Saturdays to the entire Bay Area if you are a resident.
Oh, they have a grant or something, or?
They funded it themselves.
Okay.
But it was announced not that long before. In last October, they announced that it would be free for San Francisco residents, and I think in April or maybe.
Oh, right.
No, it had to have been before that. Just before March, they announced it would be free to all the 9 counties of the Bay Area, and then they went dark.
Okay.
But anyway, Saturdays, great day in Golden Gate Park. You can go to both museums. It's so good.
Well, that's sorry. We drifted a little bit away from books.
Art.
But I did want to hear from you a bit about the 100 artists. I know there was a call put out, and then just in terms of what I love so much about your book is like sort of the range of styles and how they sort of match the era, but yet also are modern, and just why it's been important for you in all the books you have written and are writing, or maybe like to have art as a component.
Well, first I'll just say I did not coordinate the art for this book. And that's because even though I'm an art historian and a critic, I am not a well-organized person in the way that it would require to commission 100 artworks.
Yeah.
Follow them through to completion, often offer editorial feedback. So that was done by an editor at Chronicle. Chronicle makes the most beautiful art books in the world. I got to see the work as it came in, and to give the tiniest amount of feedback, because that's all that was required. I mean, there are just amazing artists out there, and the cool thing about the internet and social media is you can find people really easily who are doing incredible work. So it was just a fabulous experience from beginning to end. I kind of couldn't picture how 100 artists with 100 different styles was going to be cohesive. And what I love is that it's in a way not cohesive, and it doesn't matter. Like there is
the movement wasn't cohesive.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know, it totally works. I love the art in the book, and that was one of the great gifts of doing it, for sure. I remember when your book cover was being worked on.
for the first edition and the second edition.
I know, exactly, as your art advisor, of which I am not at all, but had opinions. But you've had beautiful covers, and I think you're really lucky to have them, because some people don't.
Yeah, I feel fortunate. I remember for the first one, I thought we'd have like a discussion about like, what colors do you like? But we had sort of like deep conversation about what it meant to be an immigrant, and how the lettering had to look almost hand-drawn, or like vaguely, I don't want to say like not typewriter font, but like not totally machine clean,
right?
But just sort of like the sort of like roughness, or the make it until you fake it kind of motto or ethos you have to live in, in order to survive in this country. And so, but yeah, it is interesting the ways in which you know, a great cover is what makes someone pick up your book. I
Definitely.
think it's what makes reviewers consider your book more seriously. If there's a sense of like, you know, this is a book we should pay attention to. So.
And we all know people who are sad about their cover, and that's like heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because you pour your heart into a book. But you know how like there'll be a new season of clothing and it will be like, this is, you know, cherry pink season, everything's cherry pink or
Yeah.
everything's green. I have to wonder, like, is gold the 2020? I mean, it's pretty wild, right?
Exactly. No, I love our matching, the pop of color with our matching covers.
I know, it's so amazing. I love it. Hey.
So it looks like we have some questions.
Yes, I would love to answer questions.
Okay, so Maya Kelly says, Bridget, why art of all things as a lens on suffrage and women's rights?
Well, I mean, I feel strongly about this. You know, people will sometimes say, for example, about art history that it's this sort of frivolous humanity. But the fact is, art is one of the things that makes us human. It is the essential activity of humanity. You can go all the way back to Australopithecus and find art making.
Is that inside a cave?
Well, even before that, but
okay.
Yes. But cave painting, I mean, it's ubiquitous across cultures. There is no human culture that does not make art. And what's more, art is this very pithy way of having a kind of porthole onto society, whether it's aesthetics, economics, race, gender. It expresses so much in a very quick and very understandable way. So for me, art is the ideal way to discuss history and to illuminate history.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and with your book, is there like a favorite plate that you kind of return to, or was there something that you didn't expect or were delighted by in terms of?
So many. Well, I absolutely love this portrait of Audre Lorde. I just think it really captures something about her that I think is so beautiful.
Yeah, that a photo even wouldn't capture.
No, because you can bring out something more. And this one of Anita Hill and oh my gosh, I can't think of her name right now.
Christine Blasey Ford.
Yes, Blasey Ford.
Yeah.
Something about this where it's like these were two moments separated by many decades that reflected each other.
Yes.
Right. These two academic women who were very thoughtful and careful with their words and very brave and very calm going into these maelstroms of horror in front of American lawmakers.
Right, and it's not a photo that would have happened in real life.
Right. But right, and if you saw them put together, it would feel a little manipulated, but somehow as an artwork, it really works to me.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let me see. Someone wrote, thanks for the Frida Kahlo reference for Saturday. I want to see a member also. 100 paintings, Houndstooth, fall 2020.
I think she's saying here, Vivian, yes, I think you're saying that Houndstooth is the look of fall 2020. And I am pro Houndstooth.
Oh, you mean from the photo?
I think.
Wait, but I think of Houndstooth as kind of an 80s thing. I had a Houndstooth shirt.
But Houndstooth is like oh no, it was definitely an 80s thing. I had like a Houndstooth dress that was fantastic. But
did it have shoulder pads too?
Oh, of course. I think of Houndstooth as like Sherlock Holmes. Isn't it like an old British thing?
Right, like with his deerstalker cap.
Yes, exactly. So noted. So in addition to gold covers, Houndstooth will be our look for fall 2020.
Exactly. Okay, look at the, okay.
Are there more questions?
What is the difference between a novel and short stories? This one's for me.
Oh,
yeah. No, I think this is interesting because I think on one hand, novels and short stories are both prose, they're both narratives. Yet I think short stories are probably closer in DNA to a poem, which because of their relative brevity, language becomes more important, or just the fact that it's about a turn, like an emotional turn. It's not the end, a short story comes to an end, but it's like sort of an arc as that's going to be part of a much larger one, that yet sort of the terms of the short story is that it's going to have that feeling of closure, but yet that feeling like you could just turn the page and the world would continue. Whereas a novel, you're following this character for 300 pages, their ups and their downs, the subplots, the climax, the denouement, all that. And, once you close the book, you're like, that was nice. And then you sort of finished your journey with them. And I don't know if, I always want or hope that my short stories would kind of continue to resonate with readers, like after they read it, like wondering like what would happen to them, or what, I think there's in some ways a greater, if we're thinking about it in terms of energy, there's more possibility after the ending of a short story versus a novel, which feels very final.
Well, you have a story, VIP tutoring, where I want to know what happens next. Like, what happens next?
Yes. That's about a cheating ring at a Midwest college, sort of, again, based on somewhat true events. So
I could really relate to that. I was quite a cheater in high school.
Okay, another question. Bridget, if you could go in the past to meet anyone in your book, who would it be and why?
I have been asked this question before, and I love it. And of course, there are so many people I would love to meet in the past. That's kind of the dream, I think, of anyone who lives with history. But the person who I most would like to have a conversation with is Audre Lorde. I showed her picture also. And when I think about why is that, it's because to me, Audre Lorde is like, she's almost like someone from the future who came back and landed in the 1970s. She was such an incredible thinker. She was such a brave activist. I mean, she was a mother. She was a lesbian. She was I think she says like Black lesbian warrior poet. I love that she was a poet, an artist, and an amazing poet and an amazing thinker who wrote incredible essays, and an amazing speaker. And I mean, she wasn't just an activist in the United States. She was internationally active in Germany and South Africa. I respect every aspect of her life and what she did and what she stood for. I admire her so much, and I want to know, what is a person like that like in person? I just want to meet her.
Yeah. Well, just to rip off of that, I had an opportunity to read Octavia E. Butler this summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd heard so much about her, but I read Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, which deal with sort of vaguely in the future apocalypse, but she's so incredibly prescient. She was also, a Black writer who felt like she came from the future to kind of tell us about what was coming. I mean, just so much. She wrote the first book in 1986, and she's predicting candidates that say "Make America Great Again."
I know.
I felt a chill, and then just how the fact that they're making acorn bread and packing go bags, and just, I don't know. Is it like predicting the future, or is it sort of a guide for?
I know, Octavia Butler, you guys.
Yeah.
Read her.
Yeah.
Somebody says, what are we reading right now?
Yeah.
I'm reading a really good book.
What is it?
I need to grab it because it has kind of a title I don't remember. Hold on.
Yeah, another one I'm reading right now is called Yoko Ogawa's The Memory Police. I guess, I don't know, but it's sort of in the speculative fiction realm. I wouldn't necessarily have, I read a lot of science fiction books when I was a teenager, but like somehow now the parable-like nature of it seems, when reality defies fiction, there's something that I've been finding a lot of, I don't want to say solace, but just been really compelled by speculative fiction. Anyway, Yoko Ogawa's Memory Police involves, you know, an unnamed island. It's a Japanese translation where the Memory Police decides like there will be no more roses, and then every bit of it has to be forgotten or eliminated. And one by one, things are being eliminated, and there's a resistance movement, and it's really great. So, Bridget, what's the book you're reading?
This is so apropos because you're referencing fiction, I'm referencing nonfiction. It's The True History of the First Mrs. Meredith and Other Lesser Lives by Diane Johnson, who is better known as a fiction writer. She wrote The Divorce, which is actually one of my favorite novels. But this is a biography she wrote in the 70s about a Victorian woman who was a writer, but she was married to a very famous poet and left him for a painter. And the introduction is written by Vivian Gornick, who I love.
Oh,
and
she's amazing.
She's amazing. And it was out of print for years. I'd never heard of it. And it is so right up my alley. And it's so witty and it's so easily done. It's not like that kind of heavy biography. The New York Review of Books this week has a piece on Vivian Gornick. And I just felt like it was this amazing, like where it all comes together.
What do they call it? Synchronism? Or...
Like synchronicity, like this zeitgeist moment. So I love Diane Johnson. I love Vivian Gornick, and this is a great biography.
So we have a request to hold the book up again.
Oh, sorry. The First Mrs. Meredith and Other Lesser Lives, and it's a inscribing once again of women's lives into these lost histories.
Yeah, I think I've always felt that's a rich place for fiction to go where the official record ends and to sort of go beyond. And I think that's the case with many of the stories in Deceit and Other Possibilities. In my novel Reverse Stars, which is all about the Chinese maternity centers in Southern California, and then my next book, which is about Chairman Mao's teenage mistress. You may or may not know that he was a fan of ballroom dancing and of younger women, and so
so good.
Yeah, so it's in the hands of my editor now. Bridget, what are you working on?
Well, it does go along the lines of this Diane Johnson biography. I'm writing the biography, lively, interesting, not too heavy, of an 18th century French painter who lived through the French Revolution by guile rather than escaping France.
It sounds perfect for a movie.
It does. Take note, everyone.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you, Robin, for your recommendation, A Tale for the Time Being. It's on my bookshelf.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So good.
And I think Carol is about to take it away. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Vanessa and Bridget. And no one asked about your scarves. So in the question box, so before we came on, they shared that the scarves honor every woman that ran for president of the United States. So I want one of those scarves. That's
fantastic. Here's
my next Google search. We hope you all enjoyed tonight's program and that you'll join us for more of our LibraryFest programs tomorrow and Friday. Visit our website, wclibrary.org, and sign up for the bi-weekly newsletter to get more program information. We especially want you to invite you to join us this Friday, September 25th at 7 p.m. for the LibraryFest celebration and fundraiser event. If you love our libraries, attend our event and support them. Event proceeds will be used to fund library programs, open hours, and resources. Join the fun. We have an auction going, and show your love for our libraries. As I always say, bid high, bid often. Visit our website, wclibrary.org, to register. Sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter. Find more program information. Read a good book. Thank you and good night.